I've learned about human performance in three very different environments: underwater, in the air, and in endurance sport. And the strange thing is that the same performance lessons exist in all three. My name's Steve, and I'm a running, triathlon, and performance coach with over a decade of experience of flying aircraft, scuba diving, and performing in endurance sports. I've seen how performance can vary from one day to another, and some of the key markers that indicate how we can perform to the best of our ability as often as possible. The coaching environment I've created is called Barber Performance Systems, and within that, I've got the performance margin. This is where I apply the lessons that I've learned over that decade, as well as the lessons that I continue to learn in order to improve performance through marginal gains. Now, these apply to everyone from beginner athletes through to professionals in the workplace and in sport. And today I'm talking about some of the lessons that I've learned from those three disciplines and how they apply to human performance. So if we start underwater, so I started scuba diving in 2017, I think it was now, and I became an instructor back in 2021. Across that period, I've dived from inland sites in the UK through to lots and lots of diving out in Cyprus, where I worked for a year helping deliver training to the armed forces, scuba divers. Now, in that time, one of the key lessons that I learned from a human performance side of things is the importance of preparation. So we see it across all three. There's lots of planning that comes in, lots of preparing for flights, for events, training. But in diving, this is particularly important. When you look at a dive, you break it down into how long you intend to be underwater. And from that, you can then deduce how much air you need to take with you. So I dive closed circuit, which means that I don't have a rebreather, which is you're not rebreathing the air, and it allows you to go a little bit longer, and there's more complex air planning, gas planning when it comes to rebreathers and open circuit. But closed circuit, you take a cylinder down with you, and that cylinder comes back up, and that is your air that you have available to breathe for that dive. Now, preparation and planning is absolutely paramount to make sure that you've got enough air to get you down, complete your dive, and get back. And this becomes even more of a factor when you look at wreck dives and you're penetrating wrecks, going in, exploring, because if you get caught out and you're stuck without enough air to get back to the surface, your life is on the line. I've been on dives where I've had to take a second cylinder and you're carrying a couple with you. Sometimes it'll be diving with the twin set where you've got two on the back. And again, planning is crucial. Some of the cylinders may have different percentages of oxygen, which enable you to decompress quicker, loads of diving elements. But the key point here is that you plan how much gas you need and you plan how long you will dive for. You plan how long it's going to take you to get down, how long you'll spend on the bottom, and how long you're going to stop on the way up for decompression, and you stick to that plan as best as possible. If anything, you cut it short, because once you run out of air underwater, you're stuck. The second one with diving is communication. Now, we see problems with communication everywhere in day-to-day life. No matter what industry you work in, you've probably seen good and bad examples of communication. Now, when you're diving, communication brings a completely different challenge. It's hard to communicate unless you've got a radio, a mouthpiece where you can speak, and you've got the money to buy one of those for your recreational diving. Otherwise, you're relying on hand signals. But how do you know what the other person may interpret your signal as? You brief it before you go diving every single time. Regardless of whether you've dived with that person before, you may condense the brief slightly, but you discuss what your signals are going to mean so that you're both on the same page and you're both communicating well throughout the dive. You want to be able to ask questions. How much gas have you got left? How long have you got left? Are you too cold? Is everything okay? And as long as you've got a coherent set of signals that you've practiced and you've briefed, then you're doing as much as you can to enhance communication in an environment where communication is notoriously difficult. Moving up onto the land, then into sport and endurance sport, The first lesson and the biggest lesson is consistency. Consistency for me overrides a lot. It's more important than motivation. So motivation comes and goes. You may find that you're really motivated about a project at the start, just as you signed up for something. And over time, as other things come up and as that initial excitement wears off, motivation wanes. But consistency is where progress lives. Over time, the little and often sessions I find have had the biggest effect than the big hero session where you do a big set of intervals or you run the longest run you've ever run, but you don't repeat it. And you're so tired from these big sessions that you then have 2, 3, 4 days off afterwards and you lose that momentum and your consistency is gone. So consistency in sport is a big key to unlocking performance improvements, and I've seen it with some of the athletes that I coach where the weeks where consistency hasn't been there, particularly towards the start of coaching them, they're struggling with motivation, they're struggling to get out the door and complete intervals, complete sessions. But as soon as we find where the blockers are and we can start building consistency, whether that's changing the days they train, whether it's making it work with family life better, then we start getting rid of the friction and consistency arrives. Then we start seeing the performance improvements down the line. The second one in sport is the importance of recovery. Now, this is a big one for me. I'm massive on sleep, which I find harder since having a child. In the last year has been very difficult to manage sleep and performance, both as a pilot professionally, recreationally as a scuba diver, and in my endurance sports. So in this video, I'm not going to go into detail on sleep because I'm sure there'll be more videos coming up about that, because it's a topic that I find very interesting to start, but also I've seen firsthand the effect that poor sleep has on mood, on performance, and just on your general life, and how it can affect relationships, how it can affect work performance. So yeah, sleep's a massive one. And also within that recovery element is nutrition and the importance of fueling yourself for whatever it is you're doing. If you do live a sedentary lifestyle, aside from moving more and starting to exercise, making sure your nutrition is appropriate for your exercise levels is crucial. Making sure you're getting the right foods, that you're getting omega-3s, fatty acids, you're getting good levels of protein, things that will help your brain, help your focus, and help your performance day to day, does fall under that recovery umbrella to an extent, but also it's an active way to improve your performance day to day. And finally, in the air. So as much as a lot of these lessons come across all three disciplines, a couple that I found prevalent in the air environment. First one is complacency. Now, when I finished flying training with the military, I then went and got my private license. And my first flight after getting my license, I took my now wife for a local sightseeing flight in Lincolnshire. And it wasn't until about 5 minutes into the flight when I realised that I hadn't turned the transponder on. Now, for anyone who knows anything about flying will understand what I mean here, but it's a safety critical piece of equipment and it should be on for all flights and all stages of flight. And it wasn't until I was calling London Information and getting an air traffic service from them that I hadn't realised that I had switched it on. Now, I actually filmed this and I'll probably make a video about this later on, about complacency and making mistakes, because I think admitting to your mistakes and actually learning from them is such a crucial, overlooked skill that many people don't appreciate and aren't open to learning from their mistakes. And I think we can actually get a lot from our performance when we admit our mistakes and learn from our mistakes and not make them again in the future. But this point on complacency, I'd flown a lot already. I'd completed my flying training. I had taken almost a shortcut to getting my license because of all the experience I had from the military. And on the video, when I watch it back, I kind of played mouth music to turn the transponder on. I was reading my checklist and just said transponder, yeah, it's set to this, but I didn't confirm it was on. And that was just pure complacency and making a mistake, which happens. And finally, it's decision making. Now, I empower the athletes that I coach to make decisions themselves during a week, whether they need to move sessions around, whether their fatigue's built up, where they can't quite hit a session, or when it comes to race day, wanting them to execute their race plan, not just me telling them how to race, what paces to hit, when to take on gels, but for them to make the decisions for themselves. Now, in the air environment, decision making is crucial. There are so many cases from aircraft crash investigations where pilots haven't made a decision, and that indecisiveness is what has ultimately led to a crash and, in many cases, loss of lives. Sometimes making the wrong decision is better than making no decision at all. It can be so easy to try to find every single bit of information to make sure that you've got a crystal clear picture of what the situation is and what decision you should make and what the best decision is. But at the end of the day, making no decision at all is the worst possible thing you could do. I'm not saying to rush into making decisions, absolutely not. I've often heard it said that once you've got 51, 52, 53% of the information, you're in a position where you can make a decision. And if the situation doesn't necessitate an immediate decision to be made, don't make it. Take some time. But in the air environment, I have found that decision making and timely decision making is crucial. So that's just 6 of the lessons that I found commonplace across scuba diving, flying, and endurance sports. But there are so many more that apply to all 3 areas. Most of this channel now is going to be looking at human performance in the endurance sport world, but there will be times when I bring lessons across from flying and from scuba diving, and there are marginal gains to be had in all 3 areas. And stacking those marginal gains and those 1% up is when we see performance improve overall. If you've got this far, then thank you for watching. I hope you've learned something and hope you take something away into your training. If you've enjoyed this video and want to see more, then please like, subscribe, and if you've got any questions whatsoever about anything that I've covered today, then just leave them in the comments below and I will get back to every single person that comments on this video. So thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.